Good day, bro! Been a while!
Welcome back, Idol. Kamusta?
Lodi, kamusta yan? Getting used to the tropics again.
Ah, kamusta init?
Kamusta? Okay naman. Okay, at least gladly medyo malapit ng Christmas. Medyo okay pa yung weather compared to what I was expecting. But of course, from the Greenland,
Malapit na Christmas. It's been Christmas for at least a
I
month
know.
already
I'm
in the
talking about the
Philippines.
international version of
Ah,
Christmas, hindi yung bare months natin. So mamaya na si Jose Marichan. Yeah, bro. I'm adjusting and all of that. The funny thing is, it looks like yung sleeping patterns ko completely stable even when I'm traveling, pag nasa Europe or even all the way to Greenland. Pero
mm.
for some reason, whether it's in US or Philippines or even Japan, yung mga ganyan bansa, sira yung circadian cycle because I don't know, maybe there's something about gravity in Europe. Now, despite jet
Yeah.
lags and all, I can always sleep at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., wake up early morning. Ganon din sa Greenland. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But
Mm.
hopefully, next time I drop by there, I have a better circadian cycle, bro. Ikaw, how are you? How are things going with
I'm,
you?
I'm I'm okay. I just finished the first draft of the book, and then I'm hoping to send it to friends who can comment, namely one Richard Hidarian,
A
who can.
certain Richard Darian. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking forward, bro. Do you have a publisher in mind? I mean, has a publisher? You're revealing your publisher or what?
Yeah. I don't want to reveal the publisher yet, pero US based most likely because hanggang wala pang kontrata, hindi pa official, 'di ba? But
Yeah, yeah,
I
of
am
course, of
I'm
course.
working with a publisher and an editor from a publisher who are very enthusiastic about it. I mean, they're editing it already, so if they put in that much
Okay.
work, that
What's the
means a
word
good
there?
chance.
So is this more print or university press? What's
University pa rin because
yeah,
these are the demands of my job. I have to
of
publish with a
course.
university press.
Of course. Now, mamaya pag-usapan natin many complicated issues, including, of course, the conflict of not only the past month, but potentially the conflict of the decade, no, which is having a lot of impact all around the world. Of course, we're talking
Probably conflict of our generation,
of our generation, even although
Uh,
I'm pessimistic enough to fear that there could be even worse situation in 10, 15 years. Being in the Philippines, analyzing China, Taiwan, you never know, right? But as things stand, like the number of children just killed over the past
yeah, yeah,
weeks
yeah,
has exceeded number of children killed over past years, according to
yes,
the data I'm seeing. So from a
yeah.
humanitarian standpoint, this is crazy. This is crazy. We thought the
Mm.
Ukraine conflict and casualties was horrible. This is next level. But before we go there, let's talk about yung minamahal natin na bayan. So a number of things happened, and I felt it's perfect to talk to a historian. But before we talk about history, because I want to talk about coup, no? History of
Mm.
coup d'etats in the Philippines, because it looks like there are insinuations that you know who, right? Maybe behind coup plots against Marcos Jr. And guess what? It's not the Dilawan, it's not the Pinklawan, it's whoever's left in the power groupings na hindi.
Nagkamalabo no? As if sobrang lapit nila sa military nitong pinag-uusapan mo.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Di ba? Parang as if yung policy nila na pro-China mabango sa military and then they have the gall to organize the military.
yeah, I think this is based on this as the idea na, oh, once upon a time I appointed you, so I owe you for life. I own you
Oh,
for life.
kahit
It
kahit
just doesn't
na
work that
kahit
way.
na kahit na gusto ko kayong ibenta sa China at nakipag-alyansa ako sa komunista, okay lang.
Yeah.
Okay lang.
Exactly, exactly. Pero bago tayo pumunta sa mga coup at coup plotters, marami din tayong mga kaibigan na coup plotters dati, di ba? Let's talk about itong Department of Agriculture. Naging Department of Aquaculture ng tawag ng tao. Ito na,
Oh my God.
our favorite, bro. Our favorite department, Department of Agriculture. How do you feel about the appointment of one of the biggest donors to Marcos, who also happens to be a businessman and who happens to come from a background not in agriculture but aquaculture, right? How do you think
Well,
about it, bro?
may nabasa akong isang article na at least daw alam niya yung distribution networks kasi part siya ng distribution.
Fairness.
So there's something to be said about that, and I think lagi naman pag nag-appoint ng businessman into certain positions in government, lagi kang iiling ng konti kasi may conflict of interest. Madalas may conflict of interest unless of course bitawan niya yung mga holdings niya. Pero at the same time, we do know that the advantage of certain businessmen, kung magaling sila na businessmen and hindi corrupt na businessmen na naglalaro lang, is meron silang hands-on experience with the industry. And if they can step beyond their narrow interest and take on the position of a cabinet minister, it could be really effective. That's a silver lining. But on the other hand, this does kind of break a kind of certain pattern within the Marcos administration of really appointing technocrats to key positions, di ba? I mean, a couple of weeks back, we were even thinking na baka mag-appearance si Maroja sa cabinet or si Babe Singson sa cabinet. So between the two of us, we were thinking that there was a real technocratic push within the government, di ba? An appointment like this sounds like, a kind of Duterte appointment. Like, it's similar to like, well, hindi naman kasi nilala. Pero yung pinakamalala na conflict of interest ni Duterte, 'di ba, yung DSWD. Hindi, yung so public works na inappoint si Mark Villar, 'di ba? Very clear conflict of interest there. So this is more like a tatay move for me than a very BBM move. What are your thoughts?
Ako, bro, the best number
Hindi
one.
naman kasi sama, pero mas close
Yeah,
yun.
in fairness, I mean, both of ours are nuanced. Of course, we want whoever is there to succeed because medyo malala yung situation sa Department of Agriculture. But I mean, before going there, I mean, I wonder if there were takers. Sa given,
Yun, o nga no.
so possible.
no?
But actually, Marcos Jr. had other people in mind, including other donors who are much closer to the expertise that is needed for this department. But baka wala talagang gusto eh. So I don't know the story of other people who may have been offered this. So I'm not going to pretend that this was really the choice of Marcos Jr. and therefore this is the reflection of Marcos Jr.'s strategy about moving forward. But it's very clear Marcos wants to create a plausible deniability, not really, a 1 degree of separation from the food crisis on popularity disaster he's facing, right? Yeah. Because if he puts someone else in charge of Department of Agriculture, at least there's a fall guy. Right. So probably that's why others didn't want to take the job, because it's essentially applying to be the fall guy, right? If the food inflation moves forward. So that's what I'm looking at, bro. Baka walang takers masyado, because even with Marojas, I think it's more DTI we were thinking about rather than Department of Agriculture. Yeah. I was thinking about Kiko Pangilinan, but election is coming soon. So if Kiko Pangilinan is thinking of running, which I think he is, I heard Riza the other month hoping that, Kiko will join her soon so that hindi siya nag-iisa sa Senate, then it doesn't make sense for Kiko to join this administration for another additional reasons that, we're closing in already on next election. So baka nga wala talagang takers, and for Marcos Jr., he just felt this urgency to put that 1 degree of separation between himself and the food crisis problem. Will it work? I'm not sure, because he's still the president. He's still going to get the blame if food inflation persists, but at least he will have an excuse which he hasn't had for more than a year. Ikaw, what do you think about it?
Tsaka, yeah, of course, some fall guy, and then kasi unless you think about, again, babalik tayo dun sa taripa, di ba? We have some of the highest food tariffs in Asia. Yeah. And that's why our inflation in Southeast Asia, and that's why our inflation is the worst, because of our food tariffs, which disproportionately detriment the poor. So kahit sino pa ilagay mo dyan sa agriculture, mataas talaga yung inflation natin kung yan ang nananatiling problema. I would like to think of the inordinately high tariffs as the root, was not a root, I don't believe in root causes, but as the major cause of the problem. Some people say that the major cause of the problem is importation, yung mga parang economic nationalists talaga who believe in absolute food security. And I think absolute food security is a kind of pipe dream. I've said this multiple times. We're part of a global economy, and dahil bahagi tayo ng isang global economy, kailangan talaga natin mag-angkat. At sa pag-aangkat, kailangan natin masiguro na yung inaangkat natin ay mura, para ang pinapakain natin ay hindi na mamahalan dun sa binibili nila. So unless you can do something about that, yung tariffs, limited din yung magagawa ng agriculture department. Of course, may mga other things that are moving in the direction of tamer inflation as a whole. So, yung rate hikes ng US hindi na kasing aggressive, so baka hindi na rin natin kailangan mag-rate hike dito. Although nagre-rate hike pa rin ng Bangko Sentral, I don't know why, because the Bangko Sentral is the Bangko Sentral.
Nagka-catch up sila because
nag-off-cycle rate hike si Gov. Remolona. So there are other things that could tame the inflation in the short run, pero yung long run food inflation. And remember, ito talaga yung conclusion ko. When we talk about inflation, hitting the poor, we're actually talking about food inflation. And so unless we address yung big issue around food inflation, I think may hirapan talaga yung agriculture department and all this other stuff like central bank interventions, temporary tinkering with distribution problems. That stuff can help in the margins, pero yung malaking issue, yung napakalaking taripa, unless matugunan mo yun, sa tingin ko mahal pa rin yung pagkain.
Bro, I'm gonna push you a little bit here. I mean, none of us are agricultural economists here, but I think yung sinasabi mong tariff, ito yung essentially yung buwis sa mga imported na bigas. A lot of that from Vietnam, 90% from Vietnam alone, and then the rest from Thailand, etc. I would say that's the quote-unquote proximate cause. But ano yung
I like the word proximate cause.
That's the proximate cause. But ano yung mga structural factors? How can we explain a country like the Philippines, which has such a fertile soil, such a good climate, etc., is so dependent on food imports, hindi lang sa bigas? I mean, what really explains the failure of our agricultural sector? I mean, naintindihan ko na in the past, pinag-usapan natin, maybe yung diet natin, medyo bawas-bawas sa sana all, rice, all-day rice, double rice, triple. I understand. I mean, I have many athletic friends around me who are saying, yeah, we really have to cut the rice. But it's easy to say for you because you can have steak. Right?
Mahal ang protina eh. Oh.
Exactly. But aside from, yung mga advice na cut on the rice, healthy lifestyle, mga ganyan. No, I mean, what are the structural factors? What explains, okay, I'll put it this way, bro. What explains the fact that, and this must be close to your heart, that the Philippines has the longest running and the most failed land reform program anywhere in Asia, if not in the world? I mean, this is close to you because of your Hacienda Luisita research back in the day. Your current book looks at, of course, the Philippines political economy in crucial years. So, paano natin maintindihan yun? Bakit ang Pilipinas ay napaka-underdeveloped pagdating sa kanyang agricultural sector?
Alam mo, and here, tama, this is where maybe the traditional left has a point. Naalala ko sa Hacienda Luisita, pag hawak ng kuwang ko yung lupa, may times kasi na hindi mahawakan ng mga kuwang ko yung lupa. So magbubungkal sila. In other words, they'll just occupy the land and they'll produce what they need to produce for themselves and for trade. Yeah. So pag hawak ng kuwang ko, magtutubo yan, meaning they grow sugar. And sugar is important, but it's export and it really doesn't feed people. Yeah. Pag nag-out yung kuwang ko, magda-diversify yung mga magsasaka. So they start nagtatanim ng gulay, nagtatanim ng mais, all sorts of things that can feed people. So there's an argument to be made na more land reform moves individual farmers away from itong mga cash crops na ready for importation and will move them towards crops that feed themselves and feed other people. So there's absolutely a point to that kind of more traditional leftist argument. Makikita mo yan eh. Punta ka lang doon. So bakit walang land reform? I think this is one of those issues where I don't like the elite capture argument, diba? Medyo sawa na ako doon. But this is the one issue where the elite capture argument really does.
But it makes sense kasi, diba? Your travel
this is the one issue where it makes too much sense.
Landowners, they're never gonna... yeah, I mean, that's the point. I mean, I understand you're being iconoclastic and I think a lot of times you have the point. But sometimes may point naman talaga eh. Yung
ito pare, ang linaw nito kasi ito medyo malinaw, 'di ba? Yung kongreso ni Cory, sino nagkumpas ng land reform efforts ng panahon na yun? Si Piping Kuangco, yung kapatid niya na may-ari ng Hacienda Luisita. At bakit hindi pamigay yung Hacienda Luisita? Dahil si Piping nag-push ng legislation na sinabing hindi mo kailangan ipamigay ang Hacienda Luisita. Kailangan mo lang bigyan ng stock options yung mga magsasaka doon sa kumpanya. At effectively, land reform na yon or distribution dahil may stock options sila. Yung mga respondent na nakausap ko, sabi nila, every time nakakatanggap sila ng benepisyo from yung kanilang shares dun sa kumpanya, mas marami pa silang binabayad dun sa tricycle para kunin yung pera kaysa dun sa pera na nakukuha nila. I mean, this one is, I guess, a straight up case of elite capture, yung land reform.
Oligarch talaga natin. Yeah.
Having said that, diba, parang there's also meron ding isang argument dito na how do you force the elite to transition away from haciendas, right? How do you do that? How do you force industrialization? Well, you need state support then. And I don't think state support has supported industrialization so much.
Inevitably,
so the elite argument does work, but yung broader argument natin about how a developmental state can transition away from that, I mean, you need to force the land reform through laws, right? Parang if force mo yung land reform, that requires political will. But on the other hand, you need to create parang economic circumstances wherein mas madali silang i-kick out of their land because there are other industries available in the Philippines that the government will support, like, things that are more associated with industrialization in a developmental state, tradables.
So it's more like essentially double incentive, right? Positive and negative. Negative incentive to, ito na, land reform na.
Oh, yayarihan namin kayo. Oh.
Yan. Pero pangalawa, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. You can still have your 10 yayas and 12 drivers and all because we will find another industry that will give you a lot of
because magtra-transition tayo to whatever, to electronics, di ba? This is where yung diversification of exports is quite necessary. I don't think you can have complete land reform if you don't diversify exports because this is the elite. Hindi mo basta-basta kayang brasuhin yan sa Pilipinas. Kailangan din talaga ng incentive to transition.
Which is a very good point because I essentially have two countries in mind, no? Vietnam and Thailand, where we get much of our rice, no? 90% essentially from Vietnam and the rest from Thailand. These two are agricultural superpowers. The Vietnam one, I mean, I like pho, I like so many things about Vietnam, but it's a communist socialistic country, authoritarian. So I'm not sure it's the best model for coming up with land reform. Of course, you and I have read the book by Lovell about Maoism, a global history, where a lot of land reform that happened is essentially pinatay lahat ng mga hacienderos, no, ng mga Maoista, no, under the command of Chinese. So that's where there was a dark turn. So if you look at the history of land reform in Vietnam, it's not very enviable, to be honest. And I'm definitely not against that kind of a Maoist way of dealing with land reform. And then you look at Thailand, it's very interesting. For a long time, Thailand was seen as the Philippines twin. Southeast Asian twin. At some point, both of us were troubled democracies and troubled economies. But at some point, Thailand's democracy went down, but their economic trajectory actually picked up. Their infrastructure became nice. And if you look at it, Thaksin, who's the man behind a lot of development in Thailand's agricultural sector, a lot of development in the rural sector, Thaksin could have been your other typical Filipino conglomerate, no? Oligarch, diba? And then if you look at it, because Thailand is increasingly an export-oriented economy, and because they attracted a lot of high-quality Japanese and manufacturing investment, kung titignan mo yung mga billionaires sa Thailand, a lot of them are even ethnically similar to our billionaires here. They're Sino-Thai, for instance, right? They're more involved in telecommunications in the case of Thaksin, and a lot of the others are involved in manufacturing, automotive industry, etc. So the incentives for them to just have haciendero style life, although of course Thailand has a different political economy history compared to us, but still, nevertheless, it's a very unequal society. It's a Southeast Asian country. I kind of see your argument because in Thailand, a lot of their big rich people, a lot of them Sino-Thai, they're very involved in more high value added productions, manufacturing, automotive, telecommunications, rather than the typical Pinoy style of landed elite landlord, and essentially the opposed of our robber barons back in the day during the colonial era. Diba? Parang I'm just trying to see what are the reasonable and appropriate lessons we can draw, and I kind of understand, like if you look at Thailand, their manufacturing pickup, an uptick over the past 20 years, kind of perhaps gives us an idea how things could also work in the Philippines, short of a kind of Maoist, aggressive, bloody reign of terror land, which I think some of our friends in the left essentially imply, if not openly, and don't. I just don't think that will work.
I mean, for our friends in the left na parang may Vietnam envy, I really recommend this book called Alec Holcomb's Mass Mobilization in the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, 1945 to 1960. It looks at really yung mobilization efforts and yung displacement ng mga tao sa Vietnam during land reform efforts. Kasi, for example, parang because it was so ideological, the Chinese gave them a number. They said like, X percentage of people are evil landlords. So because they had to conform to that number, kahit yung mga kaalyado nila, tinitigok nila, and then eventually, ang nangyayari dyan, as like the war on drugs, ginagamit yung law as an excuse to get back at your enemies. So sasabihin mo, landlord ito, i-displace mo, ganyan. Parang yung tokhang dati, parang
drug lord sila, landlord. So drug lord kayo, digong landlord sa kanila. Exactly.
So that's what happened in Vietnam. Yeah. Alec Holcomb is a terrific anti-communist historian who actually worked in our departments at Berkeley, so he highly recommended.
fascinating. Again, it just confirms that, like, I like a lot of things about Vietnam, but let's not forget how they got where they are, and a lot of that was not really democratic. And remember, there's one country that can give us an idea about how things could go wrong if we go down the Maoist way. Spain, if you look at the civil war in Spain, diba, when the far left pushed the envelope, that's where fascism came in. Diba? The whole General Franco phenomenon was a response to the progressive movement in
Oo nga,
Spain
no?
to deal with
Oo.
liberalism.
Oo,
And then the
oo.
milder version, if the socialist left version of course, Salvador Allende, no? And how that created a fascist response from
Pero pare Amerikano naman ang sumagot naman doon, Amerikano. Ang problema mo doon. Si
Well, as if
Kissinger.
walang American influence sa Philippines, right? You think the Americans will stand with the landed elite who are their friends, or go?
Hindi naman. Not today. Yeah. Not
Exactly.
today. Pero just the Allende backlash is also a kind of Kissinger backlash, I would say.
Yeah, although interestingly, so di ba anniversary I mean, the whole coup against Allende the other month, and a number of very well-informed Chileans, including a former finance minister, among others, were interviewed, and their argument is that actually, which is something very close to my heart, this idea that it was Kissinger and, I don't know, Friedman and all of those it's the whole, the new liberal CIA complex. Parang sa point, what he was saying is that is like factor number 9, right? Because he was saying that actually there was a very almost fascistic, ultra-conservative constituency in Chile. In short, do not underestimate the agencies of indigenous trapos to do the dirty job, and that they don't need your new liberal Chicago boys to come in and do. So parang the idea is that semi-leftist conspiracy theory, there's a grain of truth. Of course, we have evidence for that, but it's kind of exaggerated at the expense of appreciating the agency.
Or yung example dyan, yung 65 killings sa Indonesia, diba? One of the worst acts of mass killing we've ever seen in Southeast Asia. I mean, there is evidence that the United States supported the military there. There is in fact evidence that Ninoy Aquino supported the military there because he allowed for the training of Indonesian troops in Hacienda Luisita. So merong external support. But man, you don't get like the mass murder of close to 1 million suspected communists if it is not a domestic phenomenon as well. It was a horrible domestic right-wing backlash in Indonesia that can be blamed on external forces, but ultimately it has to be blamed on yung dynamics right-wing sa Indonesia na napakakadiri nung time na, because Suharto was really a mass murderer, and he would have been a mass murderer even if he did not get the support of the US.
Di ba Oppenheimer din yung pangalan niya, yung documentary, yung guy who made the documentary?
Joshua.
It's Joshua Oppenheimer. No, this is not the Oppenheimer in the Hollywood, but I suggest you check it. I think you can find it for free on YouTube. It talks about the killing fields in Indonesia, no?
Yeah, and
I was really haunted, no, when because I was writing dun sa libro kong isang, latest book, one chapter in Indonesia. I had to really go through the Oppenheimer documentaries. So that could happen in the Philippines if you had the left going aggressively. Yeah, exactly. There could be very violent fascistic backlash. Kaya nga I don't buy the leftist approach, because you're not looking at the countervailing forces and balance of forces in the reality.
Kailangan mag-ingat ka ng konti. Hindi naman, this is not about blaming the left for yung acts of murder, but of course...
No, of course not. Of course not. No. I mean, there were the victims here in the case of Indonesia. In the case of Indonesia, in fact, I would say that na-exaggerate din yung role ng yung influence ng Maoism and communism doon. And if you look at also Sukarno, we can have a debate. Sukarno had leftist predilections, but I think he was a much more centrist guy than many people appreciate. But yeah, unfortunately nga, the fascistic forces there, grabe, they took it to the next level. And in fact, up until today in Indonesia, hush lang, no? You really cannot talk about it. Up until today in Indonesia, this issue cannot be discussed.
I was I take Indonesian lessons, and I have an online Indonesian teacher. My Indonesian teacher doesn't want to believe me when I say that there were mass killings in 1965 and mass graves. I mean, he doesn't want to believe me. He's just like, it's this new information to me.
Grabe, no? I mean, it's talagang mass amnesia, no? So, and the Oppenheimer documentary, if you watch it, it's crazy because the people who are involved in the pogroms were so proud. They recreated it in a mafioso way, diba? Ito yung version nila ng mga mafioso, and they reenacted the massacres they were doing. And then the incredible thing about the documentary is that you realize as they reenact it, they realize, wait, parang may ginawa kaming mali, but they're still in denial of it. So it's a very harrowing and haunting kind of documentary about this essentially repressed part of Indonesia's more or less contemporary history. This is 1960s. This is not,
Yeah. We
it's not long
we
ago.
should do an episode on Indonesia
Yeah,
and the kill.
grabe. So,
Yeah.
so yun nga, that's what I'm saying. Now, of course, Philippines is not Indonesia, Philippines is not Thailand, Philippines is not Vietnam. But I'm saying if there's some lessons to draw from our neighbors and all, I don't know. It looks like a Thailand one seems to be the most, you know, how should I say it? The least radical, but not necessarily the worst one, right? I am all for radical reforms, but not necessarily for radical methods.
Yeah. Actually, ako
That's the
Richard,
difference, yeah.
tama ka. I super agree. Ako hindi ako naniniwala sa Singapore envy eh. It's not a development path that's available to us. I have Bangkok envy. I have real Bangkok envy. Every time I go to Bangkok, I'm like, this is what Manila could be. And I think yung ganun is kind of, it's a fair comparison. It's a fair challenge. We should challenge ourselves to become a little bit more like Bangkok. Bangkok's an extremely livable place. I love it. And hopefully Filipinos can have some. Of course, it's not perfect, di ba? Meron ding element dyan na tinatago yung mamahihirap. Bakit konti yung mamahihirap sa urban Bangkok? Kasi pinaalis, di ba? Dinadala dun sa outskirts. There is something MLDific about it. But still, you cannot deny na there are successes in terms of yung public transportation system, for example, which is a lot better than ours.
Lahat,
So, things like that.
No, I completely agree. Kaya nga sabi ko, I know on the surface, Philippines and Thailand look very different, but actually they're not. I mean, if there are two countries that are most comparable in Southeast Asia, I would say it's Philippines and Thailand. And if you were in Bangkok 25 years ago or so, it was as bad as Manila in terms of traffic, yung maduming rivers. I remember the last time, not the last, actually I'm more regular in Bangkok, but one of the times I was there, I was next dun sa main rivers nila dun, no? Di ba, mga hotels are there. And you're talking to your friends about democracy and all while you're overseeing. And we were wondering, can I do the same thing with Pasig River one day? Can I write about Pasig River the same way that Rizal was writing about Pasig River when Simon was coming back? Remember yung opening scenes dun sa El Filibusterismo? Diba? Simon is in the ship. Yeah, exactly. And they pass through Pasig. It's like, if I'm gonna complete Rizal's trilogy, I'm not sure I want to start with Pasig. Like mention Pasig because Pasig is the beating heart of Manila, and yet, I don't see much of life there, but it could be fixed. I think Bangkok and Thailand provide us, and of course, you and I, I'm sure you can relate to this. And by the way, I owe you a nice dinner. Lelo, yung food diplomacy, Thailand's food diplomacy is gold standard, right? How they promote it in a systematic, conscious way, yung Department of Ministry of Trade nila, Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they made sure they bring in the chefs, they bring in the ingredients, they standardize it. And next thing you know, global Thailand became a reality. So I think Thailand is what the Philippines can become if we get some of the basic things right. Of course, with a different flavor, literally and figuratively. Yeah. Now, I wanted to end on this point on Thailand because, of course, I think a pet peeve, but this is our favorite thing, industrial policy. I keep on bringing this up. In fact, the other day I was just talking because Prime Minister Kishida of Japan was here in Manila. He just left for Kuala Lumpur, and I was talking to one of his cabinet ministers, etc. And one of the things I mentioned is, sana hindi lang Pilipinas hanggang defense cooperation, surveillance. I mean, West Philippines.
Although that's exciting,
Oh, but which is exciting, of course. I mean, I feel we're important. Why would the Japanese cabinet minister even bother to meet someone like me, right? Of course they should, but it's because the Philippines is more important. Or let's put it nicely, why do you think they bother to meet BBM so much? Not because BBM is the next level leader. No, it's because Philippines is becoming more important. It's in a strategic sweet spot. But parati ko sinasabi, sana it goes more. And in fact, our Japanese friends were saying they're interested in green infrastructure investment. They're interested in making the Philippines an auto manufacturing hub, just like Thailand. I mean, like all of these things, music to my ear. But of course, always politely, you will hear something in between the lines by our counterparts, not necessarily Japanese only, na sana ayusin ng konti yung infrastructure, sana ayusin konti yung corruption, sana ayusin konti yung red tape. So, I don't know, I'm just saying this industrial policy thing is just not sexy again. I think it's very sensible in the case of the Philippines because we're getting all of this attention and all. That's just really where I'm coming from. in terms of this constant emphasis on industrial policy. And of course, to just connected dun sa conversation natin today, you cannot have a strong manufacturing sector if you don't create equitable growth, create a middle class, including a rural area, get your food security in order. The ADB had a very good paper a few years ago that showed the synchronicity you need between agricultural development and manufacturing development. Because the problem with the Philippines is ours is service-oriented economy, no low-end, low to medium-end service-oriented industry economy. Most of our conglomerates are not car manufacturers or high-tech manufacturers. They are, land. I almost said land grabber. Of course, I didn't mean that. They are into real estate.
Siyempre meron din.
Yeah. Baka yung isa. Baka yung isa. Hindi naman. Okay. Wag na tayo mag-name drop masyado. Baka may papagalitan tayo. Bakit? Bobo ba kayo? Ayan. All right. Leila, thank you very much. I enjoyed this. I really enjoyed our discussion agriculture. Next episode now, let's go to the issue of coup, civil-military relations in the Philippines. I think Thailand is a great country to end.
Oh, Thailand na naman.
The great country to start with for our next episode. Because when it comes to coup d'etat, that's where I think we should not
tayo sa kanila.
Thailand. Yeah, exactly. I think perfect yung natin transition. Salamat.